Here we go. It's Wednesday night. Okay, there we go. We'll get all together here, get everybody situated, find a seat. Don't leave. Okay, grab a Bible. Okay, Galatians chapter 1. We really won't really be in Galatians 1 tonight, but we're going to be in Galatians. We're going to bounce around here. So this is our first night of Galatians. We're going to be going on this journey for several months, and lots of reasons to study Galatians. But first, of course, we want to open it up on the floor. As soon as you hear, oh yeah, we're going to study Galatians on Wednesday night, what comes to mind? We've done this before. Well, there's only 66 of them. So we keep doing them over and over. It's like, I know, it's amazing how they keep coming back. You know what you say to that? I'm not going to this time. That's right. Now I'm going to spend a lot of time on chapter 3. No, I tend to spend a lot of time on chapter 3, so I know better. Because chapter 3 is the chapter. Okay, so number 1, we've spent too much time on Galatians already. What other comments? You can keep going. I like it, actually. It means you're still breathing. I mean, because you know how it is. Some members, right? You know what churches... It's a whole region. It's not just a single church. What else? You know, that's a great comment, because it's not just a bunch of churches. Galatians is actually what? It's people. And who are the people? Us. Like, I'm from Galatia. And so this is my book, right? Because I'm Bowen, and Bowens are what? Welsh, and the Welsh are Celts, and the Celts are Galatia. And so, right, if you're from Wales, Ireland, Scotland, England, guess where you're from? Galatia. And so this is your people. This is Paul writing to you you people that, right? And so that's just the way it is. Because, your ancestor, like Bruce McGillicuddy back there, his ancestor was like... Well, how do you know? Have you done the 23andMe? Okay, before we completely lose it, we're going to talk about that tonight, the Celts and the history and all of that. What else comes to mind? Galatians. Yes. Yes. So that's what the book's all about, isn't it? It's about these first century Christians, and a lot of them are going to be Gentiles, of course, because it's that region, and they've become Christian, but the Jews come in and say, well, you really need to be both a Jew and a Gentile in order to practice this thing called Christianity. And so Paul's going to write the book to explain to them that they don't have to be Jewish, of course, and do all the Jewish stuff. So that's going to be a big part of our book, of course. But it's deeper than that. It's a battle between the various religions, right? We'll get to that in a moment. Okay, any other comments? Galatians. Yes. So we'll get to that also. Paul doesn't just make one argument concerning don't go back to the law or don't follow the law. He actually makes 3 major arguments, one of which is the personal argument. He personally He says, look at my personal life. And that's how you'll know I'm a living, breathing argument for not going to the law, but staying with grace. So we'll get into all of that, of course, in the book. And so when you think about this book, it doesn't hurt to bring that up, because that's really the kind of the framework for it. So let me turn some slides here, and let me come way up here. You guys scoot way back, and of course, so you know how that changes the sound. And so, but probably changing the sound is good. All right, Galatians. So let me go ahead and open up there too, because I'm using this other Bible. I don't even know if it'll stay open there. Oh, it will. Good. Okay. I'm trying to read out of, like, this one's called a Serendipity. Yeah, Serendipity Bible Study book. It basically takes the New International, but then it like puts a bunch of study stuff on the sides. And so it's just another one of those ones. Here we go. Just a list of like things that Galatians will look at. Like our relationship to the law. What is our responsibility in relationship to the Mosaic law? Why did we have a law? What was its intent? How does the law relate to God's promises to Abraham? You know, the big promise, like through your seed, that is the one, Christ, all the nations will be blessed. How does the law fit into that? If that's so important, why even have the law? How does the gospel relate to God's promises then to Abraham? So if we are all about God's promises to Abraham, well then what value does the law actually have? How does it always come back around to us? And so that's all kind of like the Bible stuff, right? Let's get, just for like 5 minutes here, let's talk about what this book is really all about. And so here we go. How many religions are there in the world? It's a trick question, I know. It's like, you can. So in one sense, there's billions of religions. Yes. But really, okay, some spiritual being, some supreme being, whatever it might be. Really, okay, here's what I want you to think about this, because it's just something that's good to think about for a minute. And then we'll go on to the book and really get into this. But your battle is inside your own heart, right? All of us battle the forces of sin and Satan and all of that right here inside of us. And so, and what is this battle that's taking place? What's the battle that's taking place in America right now, if you want to talk about the battle? And so I want to take us to the next level in this, to help you see how God works and how the world works. There really is only two different belief systems. Now, we can talk all day about the 9 different worldviews that James Sire talks about, the 5 different I know all of the different, stuff that's written out there. And all of them, of course, have frameworks for us to look at and talk about. What's the difference between, a Hindu and a Catholic or whatever it might be. But really, when you boil down to it, our battle has always been paganism and monotheism. If you're not a monotheistic believing person, you're really a pagan. Now, that's a term invented by Christians to talk about other people who are pagans. The pagans never called themselves pagans. Like the Romans didn't go around going, we're a bunch of pagans around here. They went around going, we're a bunch of Romans who have a very orderly, structured belief system. And you should believe it too, so that you too can continue to live within the Roman Empire. But what is paganism and monotheism? Okay, let's take what Tim just said and let's put it into the language. And so that's all it is, isn't it? Oh, okay, sorry. Tim said, is it theo, is it God-centered, or is it man-centered? So let me kind of like stretch that, because that's a great way to say it from a Christian perspective. But we'd expect you to do that because you're a Christian. And so, see, the pagan viewpoint wouldn't say it quite like that. They would say, is it immanent or is it transcendent? Everything in this universe is only in two places. Do you believe the whole universe and everything about it is what you can see, feel, touch, this universe? Or do you believe there's something outside the universe? If you believe everything that controls, creates, adapts, does whatever thing it is contained within the universe, then you believe that it's all right here. You're a pagan. I mean, that's what we would say as Christians. Now, you would say, I'm a scientist, or I'm a whatever thing you want to say, right? I'm a XYZ. I'm a naturalist. I'm a pantheistic whatever. I mean, there's all kinds of terms, but when it gets down to it, you believe when you're dead like Rover, you're dead all over, and you don't go anywhere else because everything that exists in this universe is all that exists. That's the Roman belief structure. If you believe that there's something out there that's beyond us, like the other, someplace else, then what are you? Then you're in the other camp. And so I'm bringing that up because I'm just reminding us of the basic framework and the fact that actually the predominant worldview today is what? Nobody's going to say it. Pagan. Because how do most people think? They think everything is in the here and now. That's all a Roman thought. A Roman didn't run around going, Romans are very smart people. Romans were a gifted civilization that did many amazing things. We talked about it before. The richest Romans had indoor plumbing, heat, central air, both heat and cold. They had all kinds of stuff, right? An emperor could have ice cream any kind he wanted. And so it's like the Romans were very wealthy people and very organized, very orderly, very rational. And they said, there's nothing that exists outside this world. And they had a religion that went with that. Their belief structure goes with that. The only reason the Christians are targets is because the Christians believe in something out there they can't see. And it's like, who would believe in something that exists over there, out somewhere else? Like, that's crazy. And so we, of course, as Christians, what's our battle? I'll put it in biblical terms. Those who have faith, Hebrews 11, believe that God, you can finish it for me, that he exists, and he rewards those who believe that he does exist. Period. See, that's the battle. That's the battle lines. That's a very Roman way of looking. It's like, do you believe that there's something out there or not? Now, if you don't believe anything's out there, then everything can become all kinds of things. Like everything kind of becomes equal in some ways. Or like everything's right here and exists and then it doesn't. It's like, we want to argue over all this stuff, don't we? Like, molecules in motion. We can get all into all kinds of stuff, but really it really boils down to that. So I'm being very, very basic. Who was it that wrote extensively on this besides some of the guys that are writing extensively on this right now? Olden days, it'd be T.S. Eliot. did a whole big thing where he tried to explain that in front of, in the academic world. But you have to be very careful not to use the word pagan because it has all those connotations connected to it, like you're some kind of, whatever. And the Romans, of course, never used that term. But they very much understood what I just talked about, that we believe in what we can see and feel and touch, and this is our universe, and that's how everything works. And you people believe in something somewhere else. Like, you've never seen them, you've never touched them, felt them, you don't know. It's like, how can you do that? And so, that's still the battle. And guess what? It's still the battle within each of our hearts, right? All of us still battle between the here and now and the eternal. And which one has more sway and more control over our lives? That's the battle we all face, isn't it? And so now bring that into Galatians. I went 7 minutes on that, so sorry. So now bring that into Galatians. It's like that battle is still there in so many ways. It's like, is my belief structure, my being a good Christian, where does it reside? Here? Or how I interact with there? It's the same question, isn't it? Yeah. Or is it based on the here and now? That's really the bottom line, isn't it? If I'm a Christian and I think it's more about the here and now, well, then I'm going to focus on, well, okay, what does that mean? I mean, like the Jews lived peacefully within the context of the Roman Empire. Why? Lots of reasons, but one reason is, they basically kind of do a bunch of stuff that we do. We worship, we burn stuff on altars, and we do all this stuff because it's all imminent. It's all right here. It's right here. And then these Christians start coming along, and what are they saying? Oh no, everything is about there, wherever there is. Like, can you explain where there is right now as a Christian? Like, where is there? Where is this throne room you're talking about? Where is this almighty God that lives and exists? We know where our almighty gods are, for the most part. They're over there on that mountain. They live over there within the water. The sun up there has some power. Right there. Where's yours? Well, and the sun warms my crops, gives me energy, and makes the food grow. And what does your God do? Did he? See, that's a confusing thing because we'd say, well, he made the crops and he made all that and he made the sun. But you're like, my sun, my God shines, crops grow, everything works. It's hard to defeat that because we live in the here. We don't live in the there. And nobody comes back and tells us anything. Right? Okay, so now we expand that out. It makes sense, doesn't it? When we talk about this, is religion, is Christianity in particular, is the good way to go, practicing and fulfilling these in the here and now laws, or is it something else? So that dilemma is true even within, in other words, paganism is never more than it's just right there in each of our hearts. It's like our task as Christians is to somehow suppress the very natural paganism that crops up into all of our lives daily because we live in the here and now. We're all, in some ways, right? I certainly am, a good little pagan. Like the car won't start. Yeah, good luck praying on that one. Why don't you go get a mechanic and get it fixed? See, that's a pagan way to look at life. You're like, but that's what has to happen if you want your car to go. So it's a very practical way of looking at life. Rational and practical is the pagan way. Because how's your car going to go if you don't get it fixed? And this praying to some God that exists out there, what's he going to do for your car not working? So see how we are inundated. I mean, it's like it's just all around us. We can't help it. It's where we live. And so the struggle isn't just, oh, should we circumcise our children and follow the rest of the laws to be a good Christian? It's much deeper. It's like, so when we read the book, the other reason I brought this up, because I want to slant your reading with all of that in your mind, so that when we read chapter 1 next week, you hear Paul actually talking more about that than you think, because that's his world too. Except he's surrounded and inundated with everything they did. Like everything is about the here and now in the Roman world. And so it's all around him, right? We think, well, it would be silly to offer up to Poseidon or the rest of the whatevers that are controlling the water and the storms, to offer that at the ship before we take off on a cruise. That's just stupid. There is no such thing. And they would look at us and go, you're just stupid if you're not going to do this. Why wouldn't you want smooth sailing and all these different things? It's like your God's just up there somewhere. He's not doing anything about the waves. And we got to think about the waves. The waves is where it's at. You don't want the ship to break down. And so it's just, right? You can hear the pressure. Okay, here we go. Unless anybody has a comment, feel free to jump in. I'm not calling you all pagans. I was just saying it's the structure of what we, anyway. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. 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 Right. See, that's the problem with us Christians from the Roman perspective. The Romans looked at us and went, well, we just, like they love to just, oh, you have a God? Yeah, come on into the family. What is your God? Your God doesn't exist here? Excuse me? It's like we come on the scene and go, yeah, our God is not like your gods. Our God is like this. It's like this and this and this. And they're like, oh, wait a minute. No. They can't just syncretize us into the fold. And so because we're saying our God is like not over there on that mountain. And so it's just, or even worse, yeah, he's on the mountain, and he's on the hills, and he made the hills, and he's also everywhere else all at the same time. And they're like, yeah, we could go. I mean, they kind of go for that for a moment until we start explaining this other place, right? I use this a lot. I've used this for many years. I'll talk about this. It's like, I'll say, and I know it's ridiculous, but people will say, well, what would you do if you weren't a Christian? And I always say, oh, I'd be the world's best criminal, because without God, there's no what? Morals, right? There's no reason to have morals. You know, if you're not a Christian, and some of you that are really expert at law, bear with me, I'm sorry. But, you know, if you're a lawyer, it's like, this is a huge dilemma. Like, if you're an atheist and you're a lawyer, why have laws? Well, you know, I understand the contradiction there. And they do too, even as an atheist. They have to say, well, really it's just dependent upon your own definition. But then after a while they go, ooh, that's a little bit scary because everybody has a different one. So then it kind of goes, I mean, they use all these words like utilitarian or what's the C word? That's the one that's really based on what you want. But anyway, I don't remember because it's been too long. But so eventually, atheists who practice law, who write about this stuff, have to come up with like, well, the universe itself is like God. Like, not God, but sacred. In the sense that the whole universe is like special. And the universe has special moral stuff that's always true. And you're like, yeah, you're really reaching to a place you really can't defend. Because if it's all right here, I'm here, and this is what I claim morals are. Give me everything, right? That's what truth is all about. Give it all to me. And so you really can't undefend that in the long run unless you have something external to it. And so this battle which rages, and here recently I've been reading a guy who's really good. He's a lawyer that has been writing about the pagan side of things. And so, just that dilemma within Christianity. He's a Christian dude, but it always makes me think back to the difficulty of trying to show, why is it wrong to steal from somebody? I mean, defend why it's wrong to steal from someone without anything except the imminent that's around us. And then you think, wow, that's a challenge, actually. Yeah, see, that's the dilemma and we're still in, the reason it's hard for us to even see our cultures being pagan as it is because Christianity is still defining some of our words. Like, I think words that we use within places like the realm of law or the realm of society and culture. Christianity's been around long enough that those words are still being used. Because the reality is, what is good? What is good? Like, good is, in this world, what would good be? And so, like, how would you define it? How would you define beauty? And that struggle to define beauty, for example. Well, maybe there's and so I want to read a little bit of these agnostic and atheist lawyers, and that's what I'm going to go for the next few months. I want to read some of those folks because I don't have a good working knowledge of how do they. I know that several over the last 50 years have had almost like epiphany moments. Like they've walked out in the woods and there was a famous lawyer, woman, atheist lawyer I know that had this, where she walked out in the woods and it was like a bright light. And I realized all of a sudden that the good is like all of us collectively. It's like nature and the universe. And she can't say there's a supreme being. She has to say, and that's the sacred that creates what is good. Therefore, we can have the laws based on that. And you're like, yeah, that's a stretch, right? Because it still comes down to you make it whatever you want. It's just she's the one in charge, right? So she can make it for everybody else. And so, anyway, so all I'm doing right now is setting the stage for us to read this book and to see that there is a big struggle, a tug of war taking place on their hearts. And Paul's going to get into this and help try to persuade them to not go the Jewish route, the law route, the pagan route, but to come back to the transcendent God. And that's what he's doing. Okay, so lots of places, of course, that we could go. One of them is Acts. We're all introduced to Paul, of course, in the book of Acts. And who's Paul? Right, Saul at the time. And he, of course, is in hearty agreement to take out the Christians because they are not doing what's right. In Acts 8, right? He begins to move all about the cabin, all about the world, doing this stuff of dragging men and women off and putting them in prison. And so Saul, of course, is not just the opposite of Christianity. He's like destroying Christians. He's antagonizing, just like searching out and killing Christians. So that's our guy, who, of course, on the road to Damascus has his moment and becomes a Christian. And then we get the book of Galatians. And so here he is, of course, talking about his life. Like, here's who I am. So Paul wasn't just a good Jew. He was a Jew's Jews. He was the best kind of Jew, right? And so he'll list some of that in Philippians, like, I have confidence in the flesh. Do you hear it? If anybody has confidence in the flesh, I do. See, where's the flesh? In the here and now. See, it's the contrast, right? It's always going to be that contrast between, and that would be the way a Roman would talk about this subject. They wouldn't say, I'm a pagan. They would say, I just believe everything happens in the flesh. Like, doesn't it happen to you in the flesh? And how are you going to argue against that? And so, if anyone else has a mind to put confidence in the flesh, I far more. So he's setting up our battle lines. And then he, of course, talks about all the things that's happened to him in this world. Like, I'm the circumcised on the 8th day. I was the nation of Israel. I'm of the tribe of Benjamin. I'm a Hebrew of Hebrews. To the law of Pharisee, I was a persecutor of the church, right? I was found blameless according to the law. It's like, I am the best dude ever. And we know historically, right? He went to the number one school. He went to the number one teacher in the number one school. His family was probably wealthy. He was well-traveled. He had all the things, right? He knew how to do all the stuff. And what else was he besides a Jew? He was a Roman citizen. So he even had the right passport to get around. I mean, he could do it all. And so to the flesh, he was in good shape. And of course, we get Acts 22 and the rest of them, where he talks about how he's on the road to Damascus and he becomes Christian. He gets baptized there in Damascus, becomes Christian, and et cetera, et cetera. And so we have this thing. Then, of course, he goes after 3 years in Saudi Arabia, and not having seen the apostles, but instead he goes to be with Jesus for 3 years, which coincides with the 3 years that they all spent with Jesus, walking around on this earth. And he does it where? That's not in this world. He doesn't walk around with Jesus in this world. He doesn't ever walk around. He's never with Jesus in the what? Flesh. So already he's setting up an imminent, transcendent operation. Because the rest of the apostles, they walked around picking weed off the plants and stuff with Jesus. But Paul never did that. Right? He's somewhere else for 3 years. However that worked out. Because Jesus is ascended back to heaven. And so it's already something funny's going on. All right, let's look at the mission trips real quick. And so I know it's like hard to even look at. If you see the little one starting over there on the right at Antioch, all of his little things there as he goes from Antioch, way over here on the right below Cilicia, right there at the top part of Syria. And you see him going through Cyprus and up to Pamphylia. This is his first missionary journey. And then the green area, which is in the heart of Asia Minor, in the heart of modern-day Turkey, at the time was a bunch of Gauls, Galatia. And the Gauls are going to migrate to France, Scotland, Wales, England, Ireland. But right now, they're camped out mostly over here in this quadrant. They've been there for several hundred years. It was 189 BC that the Romans basically said, hey, we're kind of like in charge around here. And then by 25 BC, they made them into its own state, province, and defined it. And you can see the Lystra, right? Iconium, Derbe, the Antioch, and Pisidia over there to the left in the green area. And so there's all those places that he goes to on this first missionary journey. And those are the places that, of course, he's writing this book to. And so at some point, right, we could trace it out. Acts 13, Acts 14, he's going to all these places early, that first missionary journey. But, of course, he's going to have other journeys, right? His second missionary journey going out, he goes by land and hits those places. And so he has that. And then he goes way over and then comes back through Corinth and then comes all the way back to Jerusalem on that one. And so he's hitting Galatia several times. And so if we were to look at the date of the book, it's, somewhere between 48, who knows, right? But somewhere between 48 and 60 AD. Most charts or beliefs put it pretty early. Like this one puts it even before 1 Thessalonians. Puts it way early in his ministry. That may be too early. It may be more like 55 to 57 AD. But what matters is it was early, and it was a lot to do with the structure of the Christians in the early church and whether or not, right, you've been a Jew all your life and you've done all that Jewish stuff. How hard is it to get out of that? Those traditions are all bound where? In the here and now. So it's a strong pull for everybody, right? Including the Jews. And so just a little bit about, all right, you got the missionary journeys. He obviously had to do this book after at least his first missionary journey. And so, but a lot tend to push it even more to after his second journey. Okay. We can talk a little bit about the purpose of the book. Yes? Mm-hmm. Because they thought, the Jews, they thought the Jews were God's people, and if you're going to become a part of God's people, you should at least do all the stuff God's people have been doing for these last 2,000 years. And that would be a strong pull, right? Well, no, these are Jews who've become Christians, right? That's the whole problem. It's the Judaizers. It's the Jews who become Christians but still want to hang on to all the Jewish stuff. Yeah. Right. But there's plenty of Jews who become Christians who are also going to be in that camp of, wait a minute, you've got to still do all this Jewish stuff, or you're not pure, or whatever, right? Whatever the words would be. That creates that two-tiered system in so many churches, where you have a Jew or a Gentile that's become saved, kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. You think about it, we've not left any of that, right? It's so hard to not put into play the structure, the here and now structure in our minds. It's just hard. I've used all those different illustrations. You walk into Sri Lanka, in the Colombo. Sheila and I first go there in 1992. It's in the middle of a civil war. Our hotel gets bombed. It's a civil war going on. And we go to the church, and they're, oh, no, you can't speak. And I'm like, I just would encourage you before maybe some of you die or whatever, because that could literally happen. Like, some of them have died in this thing, and I can't speak because they have to ask the elders of some church in North Carolina somewhere, and it takes like months and months to get the answer back because they have to write a letter, and it takes so many months, and it's so many months for them to give their approval after they've done their due diligence. And you're like, yeah, that's awesome. A bunch of people over here have no clue about how church works, number one. Number two, who cares what they think? But anyway, sorry, my bad. And then, sure enough, I'm there in their little place that's kind of like an auditorium, and what's up there? Little makeshift handmade pulpit. And what's on either side of the pulpit? 2 big wooden signs that have been some brother lovingly transported those all the way from America. Signs of our faithfulness or whatever, with the little slots where you slide the letters in. Everybody remember what I'm talking about? Well, you have to be older now, but you'd put the songs up, or you'd put like last week's giving, and you're like, first of all, it's in English. You're like, can any of you read English? I can just hear them. No, brother, we don't know what they say. But every week, we have our person count the money, and he diligently slides in the little numbers. But he doesn't have a sign for rupees, so he just puts... Anyway, you're just like, yeah, somebody wanted to make sure, oh yeah, those got to be up there, or else... Right? So we're not as far away from the imminent as we think. See, I would look at that. Back then, I just looked at it and went, well, I won't be speaking here, and we left. But now in my old cantankerous age, I'd have just looked and said, yeah, you just guys have a bunch of elders who are pagan. I mean, that's pagan. Like pagans do that kind of stuff. They put up little things on the wall and bow down to them, and it's paganism. That's all it is. Like, show me the book, chapter, verse that says you have to post that stuff on a wall. You can't. And it's the imminent, and you're just being pagan. Stop it. And so, yeah. Great question. I'll give it to you. Which one causes us to do it and not? In other words, it's like this. If I can't speak there because of all of these things, see, then it's like the river you cross over in order to determine whether or not you're in or out. In other words, can we take all of this away next week and never have it again and still worship God? Oh, well, sure. But could we take it all away and still worship God? If I took those signs down, they no longer could worship in there. Point blank. Exact words they told me. You don't believe people believe that? You don't believe Christians believe and say that? Oh my word. Do you know how many people left churches when they took out the pews? They left the church. They went to another church. They said, I'm never worshiping in that building because they took the pews out. I guarantee you there are still Christians right now in America. It may not be that sacred cow, but it's some sacred cow. No, you could take them all out. I'd just soon you stood while I spoke in reverence of the Bible. See, it's not my sacred cow. You can try arguing all day long, and I'm going to get you on it because I don't think you're understanding my point. I can take these chairs out right now and worship the rest of my life without them. It's not my sacred cow. I could care less. They're just metal and chairs. You could stand, sit, clap, shout, do it all while you're standing, sitting on the ground, hitting Indian style. The difference is when I'm sitting in India and I've just sat on the floor cross-legged, and then I get up after an hour and a half worship service. We go in the back room, and we've got visiting Americans, kids, college kids. They pull the professor and me aside, and they're like, when are we going to worship God? And I'm like, we just spent the last hour and a half doing it. And they're like, no, we haven't. You didn't stand up and give a lesson and have everybody listen and then have an invitation. I'm like, you don't worship the same God I do, is what I should have told them. I just laughed in their face and looked at the professor and said, you should deal with that, and walked out. But now I would look at him and go, are you pagan? Like, what does the pulpit and standing up in front of this group have anything to do with studying the Bible? It's like, see, that's the whole point Paul's making. Now, was Paul that, what's the word, extreme in this text? So I am astonished that you are so quickly deserting the one who called you by the grace of Christ and are turning to a completely different gospel, which is really not a gospel at all. In the Greek, he's like basically looking at them and going, what are you guys thinking? And then chapter 3, verse 1, you foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you into thinking like the pagans? Before your very eyes, Jesus Christ was clearly portrayed as crucified. So I know it's hard for us to believe because we are in a group and we're at a place and we're safe. In other words, nobody's like, these chairs are sacred, or like the doors are sacred, or the technology, or the pews, or whatever it is. Nobody's doing that in our congregation. But I promise you, there are congregations out there, not congregations, there are people out there that are still being pulled into the imminent every day. And it's like they want to pull all of us into the imminent. Like, they're still out there. It's our battle. It's all of our battles. It's like, well, none of us are immune. I mean, I've got my own sacred cows, right, that I'm having to battle to get it out of my system. Like, and I'm not talking about stuff within the church. I'm talking about making myself into what? Into God, right? I want to please myself because I live in the imminent. I'm here. God's somewhere out there. And trying to please Him. But it's a lot easier to please me. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think so sometimes. I think it's just a preference. Right. Mm-hmm. 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 Right. It's hard. I mean, you're right. The comfort within that. Like, to this day, I don't understand. Like, I got here 15 years ago, and the church didn't have little tiles, little different colored tiles, and the columns on each side of the auditorium. Because where I grew up did. And I thought that was like the way you make church buildings. They had big columns, and the columns were round, and they had little tiles. And I'd do like my counting. You know, I'd be sitting there in the pew, and I'd be like, there's 37 red ones on every other line. And, you know, figure out the color thing. And then lo and behold, I leave Sunset, and there's churches out there that don't have those. And you're like, I mean, it's the same thing. You start thinking, oh, yeah, all the ones that have the wood, you know, the 1950s blueprint where the wood beams go up. Right. It's what happened was there was a kind of an official set of blueprints, and it was a lot easier just to keep using those and not get an architect and pay for the architect. So those things got taken all over America. So from California to the East Coast, you can find church buildings that still have those. well, I would like a little bit of stained glass wood. See, that's my own preference. But no. You know how much stained glass windows cost, though? Too much. All right, we're out of time. So here we go. Galatians 2, verse 20. Let's leave it on that one, and then we will get into it next week. Oh, I love this stuff. Galatians this is what I'm hoping it will do. Just like it does with me to this day, I hope this does this with you over the next few months as we study this. It's like, it's almost like a gut punch. That's the way it should be. It's like, oh, Edward. And Paul comes in and he's like, boom. He's like, stop it. Stop believing like that. Stop doing that. Stop thinking like that. Paul does that to me every time I read it. You know, I read the book real quick right before I came in here a few minutes ago. And again, I leave it going, yes, I do this without even thinking. I think like the Jewish dude without even thinking, right? It's like, it may be one of his first books. It's probably, if you can rank them, I don't think you can, but if you could, it's probably the most relevant of the New Testament books. It is by far the most difficult book to study, of course. Most graduate schools, this is by far the lowest grade that ministers make, is this particular book, this textual book. It's a very difficult book. Paul is writing in it's just very technical, his knowledge of Greek. And so, but that means it's a very rewarding, it's a very rich book. It's only 6 chapters. It's only got 3 arguments. He makes the personal argument, the doctrinal argument, the practical argument. That's all he does. He makes a personal argument for why grace is the way it is. Then he makes a doctrinal argument, which is the difficult part for us, chapters 3 and 4, because it's all Old Testament speak. So I want to get you guys going to where you know you're 3. Everybody should know they're 3, right? And so Leviticus 18:5, Deuteronomy 27:26, Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 4. But anyway, and so we want to get to where we know what is Paul doing in that doctrinal argument. And then finally he gives the practical argument. You ain't going to live by the eminent anyway. You might as well give it up. You're going to fail. And so come over to the grace side. And so he makes those 3 arguments. All right. Main text, Galatians 2:16 there. It starts it out. Let's do it and we'll be finished. He says, somewhere in here. Wow, it's not my Bible. Verse 15. We who are Jews by faith and not Gentile sinners know that a man is not justified by observing the law, but by faith in Jesus Christ. So we too have put our faith in Christ Jesus, that we may be justified by faith in Christ and not by observing the law, because by observing the law no one will be justified. If, while we seek to be justified in Christ, it becomes evident that we ourselves are sinners, does that mean that Christ promotes sin? Absolutely not. If I rebuild what I destroyed, I prove that I am a law builder. For through the law I died to the law so that I might live for God. And of course we know this verse, we sing it, etc., etc. I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. That's our theme verse for the book, isn't it? It's that simple statement that he makes here within this book. He says, notice the text, verse 20, right? I no longer live, but Christ does. So it's no longer about me, it's about Christ. If you were following our topic tonight, you could have just as easily said, it's not about the here and now, it's about the there. It's about the other place, the eternal, transcendent place where Jesus is at. That's what it's all about. And so that struggle, right, is alive and well in each of our hearts. We just want something with flesh and blood on it. We can't help it. And so, how do we judge that? It's so hard to judge. Like, how do I judge myself when I'm comparing it to some nebulous, external, spiritual thing? It's a lot easier to go, I went to church 3 times, I said these 3 things, I prayed 12 times, I did this, I did that. I'm good this week. Because everything else we do in life is like that. And he comes along and says, not you, but Christ. And it's like, oh no, I don't understand. How am I supposed to do that? And like Peter, we get swayed very easily. Right? First, Peter's going along, it's all great, and then some Judaizers came, and then pretty soon Peter's like, well, I can't eat with those people. They're Gentiles. They haven't been circumcised. And Paul has to say, straighten up. To the point that even Barnabas had gone off the deep rails, right? Gone off the deep ends. And so it is a journey. Thank you for paying attention. You guys have a great week. Next week we'll hit it, Lord willing.